Hey dudes and dudettes, Cosmic here, and welcome back to another episode of Cosmic's Gaming Showcase. And in this episode, I'm going to show you all the 10 unused maps in one of my favorite games of all time, Pikmin for Nintendo Gamecube. Keep in mind while watching that only the collision and model data remained on the disc, and that any enemy or object you see is took from existing levels. Alright, with that little disclaimer out of the way, let's begin exploring all the unused levels in Pikmin. Okay, let's start with Route. This map is incredibly similar to the impact site. There's a theory that was originally supposed to be the first stage, and the one we actually got was meant to be a tutorial level, because internally, the impact site is called Practice. This is also the only unused map not located in the test folder on the disc, further supporting the theory. I personally think the internal names were switched during development, because the impact site is structured more like an actual level, and Route, it's very wide and spacey. Perfect for getting used to the controls, but that's just what I think. You can also apparently replace the impact site's files with routes, and the Pikmin will be able to carry objects on the correct paths without mods, which is pretty neat. Alright, next map. Man, if you thought Route was simple, check out Code Test here. What you see is all you get. A white indented plane with text in Japanese. The text up here in the colored boxes reads, from left to right, soil, stone, grass, wood, mud, water, and hole. Must have been used to test walking sounds. The other line of text reads, there is nothing. Sums up the level pretty well, don't you think? However, I don't think that's all this stage was used for, otherwise they would have called it Walking Sounds Test or something. I think it would have been used in a similar manner to the Crash Bandicoot test stage Level 0. I'll leave a paraphrased quote from producer, lead programmer, and designer Andy Gavin on screen to let you know what it was for. Alright, finished reading? Great, next map. Next up, we got Map 6, a strange, blurry map with several plants and other structures not found anywhere else in the game. The reason this map's so dang blurry is because it uses a single texture wrapped around the entire model. Yes, I'm serious. That's not the only funky thing here. These leaves vanish and reappear at certain angles. Pretty strange. You know, you may have actually seen this map in the past without even knowing about it, because it was featured heavily in the E3 2000 trailer, and may have been made specifically for it, which would explain the lack of the usual attention to detail. The last thing I should mention before moving on is that there's no level boundaries here, so you'll fall off the stage if you're not careful. Alright, next stage. Looks like we're back to looking at simple maps again. This is Tudo 1. Judging by its name, it would have been a tutorial stage. I'm personally glad they scrapped this in favor of just letting players learn as they go along. It just feels more natural that way. There's a total of count 'em, two textures. One yellow and one green, and they even have little flowers on them. Okay. One interesting tidbit about this stage are the holes here. I believe these were used to test climbing sticks back when they were built straight up by the Pikmin early in development, as seen in this beta footage from IGN. I really can't think of any other reason why these random holes that don't even kill the Pikmin would be here. At the end of the map, there's a ramp you can go up where the devs probably would have tested stick bridges to get to the top of this boring looking structure here. So boring. But at least it's not as boring as the next map. Alright, next is Tudo 2, my least favorite unused map in Pikmin 1. Its name tells us, just like Tudo 1's name did, that it was most likely intended to be a tutorial stage, probably for fighting enemies, judging by the arena-like layout. Although in the stage's configuration files there's a reference to the two-player mode, so it could have been made for that, or maybe it was intended for both. Who knows? Whatever purpose this map, or any other unused map, was originally intended for, they were all relegated to mere test stages by the devs at Nintendo. Alright, dudes and dudettes, I've had just about enough of this lame level. How about you? Great. Let's move on to the next map, which just might be my favorite of the bunch. So let's hurry up and get out of here. It's time to test some shapes with Shape Test, possibly my favorite unused map in Pikmin. There's two main sections of the map, and we'll start off on the Yaku section. I like to call it that because of the repeating Yaku tiles placed on the ground, which, interestingly, is the internal name of the distant spring. The first thing to grab your attention here, or at least mine, are these large collisionless Ramune bottles with weird textures and reflection effects. As a fan of Ramune, I appreciate them being here, as well as in the Force Naval. If you're a fan of tin cans, then good news, there's plenty here. No bomb rocks in them though. They're arranged like this to, presumably, test Olimar's collision with them at different angles. Alright, let's go to the shape testing area shape test. But tread carefully, or you and your Pikmin could fall off into the abyss. Once you cross over here, you'll notice the titular shape testing going on in the middle here. It looks pretty funky, but it's only for testing how characters interact with the terrain's collisions, so looking pretty obviously wasn't the goal here. Speaking of looking bad, the lily pads here break the water effect on the ground. Lily pads never get used in the game, so maybe that's why they never created this, which is a shame, as they would have looked nice in the distant spring in particular. Last but not least, instead of having a regular background, there's a huge wall enveloping the shape testing area with a generic forest texture on it. You probably noticed that when we flew into this level, but in case you didn't, here it is again as we blast off to the next map. Okay, every map we looked at so far could have possibly been a playable stage at some point based on internal data and just observing the geography. But this map here, without a shadow of a doubt, was always intended to be a test level. And its name is, unsurprisingly, Test Map. This map's also huge. Biggest stage in the game actually, used or unused. This means that there's plenty of room to test out just about everything here. Enemies and enemy behavior, how thin platforms can be before you or your Pikmin fall off, how thin the wall can go before you or your Pikmin get stuck, measuring the height of other in-game objects, those holes we saw in 2.1, now in both large and small varieties for double the pain, and many, many more. The star of the show here, at least in my eyes, is Iwajin, a cut enemy that could have possibly been an early version of the armored cannon larva introduced in Pikmin 2, or just an object made to test boulders, as its name translates to rock generator. Some people say it resembles the withering blowhog, but I don't think Iwajin was the inspiration for its design. I could be wrong though. And last and least, similar to Map 06 and Shape Test, there's no boundaries, so it can fall right off the edge of the map. Be careful. Alright, next map. Alright, this big old map here is called Play 3, and it's obviously an earlier version of the Forest of Hope, with a few major differences. Namely, only having an exit to the north of the landing site, having absolutely no bodies of water, and having a small pathway up to where the burrowing Snagrid area is instead of a one-way drop down. Interestingly, there's a near duplicate of this same map called E3 Play 3, and the only difference is that it has a different shadow projection. Its name suggests it would have been used at E3, and it was. In fact, it was the last map they used to showcase Pikmin in, the Nintendo Difference event that they had there. Lots of neat things to point out in that video, like the whistle being able to pluck Pikmin from the ground a la the Pluckaphone in Pikmin 2, which is still in the game's code and was likely only meant to be a debugging feature. Can you tell I'm running out of things to talk about in this stage? Yeah, what's there to say? It's just the Forest of Hope with only a few differences, so, next map. Alright, this big old map here is called Play 4. Like Play 3, it's probably an earlier version of what would become a finished stage, but it seems as if it was scrapped and turned to a test map pretty early on, considering the placeholder textures everywhere. In the middle of the map, there's a large stump with a helipad symbol on it. If the map was more complete, this could have been where the SS Dolphin was supposed to land, but we may never know for sure. The texture on this stump is half unused. The bottom half of it shows a circular arena. Pretty weird. Speaking of weird, there's a few of these little caves that you can go into. May have been bomb rock locations, but there's no telling. There's this circular arena here that may have been intended for Gulix, Mamuda, or some other enemy that flings your Pikmin around because of the bottomless pits surrounding it. Also, here's an unused texture of a fence. You're welcome. Alright, next map. Finally, we have the last unused stage, anim test. The name's likely short for animation, since this map was made for the in-game model viewer, which I might cover someday. By the way, the only reason this ranks second on my least favorite maps list is because it at least has an unused texture. If it was just a regular old grass or dirt texture, it'd be my least favorite for sure. Well everybody, that's that. Hope you liked the video. If you like it, or vice versa. I upload bi-weekly, so if you want to catch more of these videos, be sure to subscribe. See you later.